So now I will go ahead and introduce today's presenter. Dwight Bain is a trusted media expert in clinical practice since 1984. He's given over 1,500 media interviews on trauma recovery after crisis events, and he's quoted in over 100 newspapers and websites, including Washington Post, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Atlanta Journal, Orlando Sentinel, Miami Herald, Newsday, FoxBusiness.com, and MSNBC.com. He's spoken to over 4,000 groups, including the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, Toyota, Disney, Florida Hospital, Orlando Health, IRS, Florida Department of Education, American Heart Association, American Counseling Association, International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, and the Global Congress on Terrorism after the 9/11 attacks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our presenter, Dwight Bain.
All right, now on my screen, Aaron, I see that you and I are up, so I'm going to take my webcam off so people can see the slide a little better.
They'll be able to see the slide regardless of whether your webcam's on because it shows up differently on their computers than it does on yours. It's on the side of your slide on their computer.
Good deal. Well, in that case, I am going to move us forward in the interest of time. So you have your interactive study guide. It's in your hand, and you'll see that there's two kinds of therapists as we take a look at the idea of focusing on mass media crisis intervention. I want to be able to equip you today about how to partner with media to stabilize people, and so there's a lot of crisis events. In fact, when I talk about crisis events, I'm going to take you back in time 9 months, hard to believe, 9 months ago. Community crisis happened. My wife and kids and I, they were home from college, and we heard, and we couldn't even believe it. A finalist from a reality TV show, Christina Grimmie, had been murdered by a fan at the Plaza Theater. And of course, the Plaza Theater is a classic theater in downtown Orlando. And it was just, he walked up at a meet and greet, murdered her. It was terrible. So that was on Friday night. And young Christina's life brought to an end by a crazed fan who then turned the gun on himself and committed suicide. And when you think about this, you think, my goodness, can that happen in our town? And then less than 20 hours later, the largest mass shooting in the history of the United States. You're seeing some of the images that our crisis response teams, some of my friends in media started sharing. Hard to believe we're looking at images from just not even 10 months ago, 9.5 months. Of course, the emergency room staff, people giving blood, the community came together. And so you think, can it get any worse? These are the tennis shoes of one of the surgeons who worked over 50 hours in continuous surgery to try to save some of the 53 survivors, 3 individuals who were wounded, who were shot, but who did survive because of the remarkable efforts of the trauma team. And then a day and a half later, a little boy at the Grand Floridian Resort at Walt Disney World was taken by an alligator. There's our Sheriff Jerry Dimmings, helicopter searching for the body day and night, trying to find the body of little Lane, who was taken right off of the beach while he was standing on the edge of the shore with his father. His dad, a college wrestler, was not able to wrestle him away from the alligator. And then eventually the sheriff gives us the bad news. The body was found. The little boy had died. So when you look at this, in your study guide, you're going to see there are two kinds of therapists. There are the kinds of therapists who know a community shooting can happen and those who deny it. Kristen Rand at the D.C. Violence Center, we've never seen anything like this before. And you'll see the image on the screen from President Obama. The reporting is routine. My response here at this podium is routine. The conversation and the aftermath of it is routine. We've become numb to this. It's hard to believe because in the Great Depression, we saw a spike in self-destructive behavior. In the Great Recession, a spike in self and other destructive behavior. When we talk about mass murders where 4 or more people are killed, 4 or more. Now, and the operative word, as terrible as this sounds, is killed. We had a mass shooting here in Orlando a week and a half ago. In a domestic violence case, a man went and purchased an AK-47 assault weapon, murdered his ex-wife, murdered his son, and then shot 4 other people with the AK-47. But only 2 people died, even though there were 6 shot. Didn't meet the criteria to be called a mass murder. Mass murders are on the rise, sadly, and as President Obama said, especially since the Great Recession, we don't just see suicidal behavior, we see self and other destructive behavior. So as we move through, remember, individuals who've witnessed some type of trauma are 4 times more likely to become an alcoholic, 4 times more likely to develop an STD, 4 times more likely to inject drugs, 3 times more likely to use antidepressants, 3 times more likely to be absent from work, 3 times more likely to experience clinical depression, 3 times more likely to have serious job problems, 2.5 times more likely to smoke tobacco, 15 times more likely to commit suicide. Because we're dealing with extreme stress. In fact, before we take the slide, I want to come back to you for a second, because you'll see in your study guide, I talk about secondary traumatic stress. Now, I want you to write down the letters STS, secondary traumatic stress, because in the moments after a critical incident, after some type of a mass shooting, you're going to have individuals who are affected by STS. It's everybody, and if that's not dealt with efficiently, that's where mental health comes in. Then we're looking at something into PTSD. And we know that PTSD is a precursor towards suicidal behavior, 15 times more likely. And right now in the Central Florida area where I live, my hometown, we're still walking people through, helping them manage these stressors, build their support systems so that we don't see a spike at that 1-year anniversary just 3 months away. Going back over to the slide, you'll see where it says community shooting response. Let me walk you through this. There'll always be community crisis events where mental health care is needed, and it's needed at every level. And when I say every level, we're dealing with the general public, we're reaching into law enforcement, we're reaching part of the work I do, reaching into media, we're reaching into parts of the community through the school system. We had a shooter on the loose. He killed a police officer, killed his girlfriend, and then was on the loose for over 7 days. 70 schools in the Central Florida area were on lockdown during the time of searching for this cop killer. They eventually caught him. He will stand for his crimes. So on every level, there are individuals who need care. After the Pulse shooting, one of the groups that I had a chance to speak into and try to help stabilize was in the banking industry. Over 2,000 employees at the major banks in downtown Orlando knew someone who was murdered or knew of someone, and they needed some type of critical care. Community crisis reaction tends to follow a predictable pattern, probably something that Aaron and I will be talking about at a future training session, because there is a predictable pattern to these shootings, but the crisis response follows a predictable pattern. The crisis creates huge cost in productivity and profitability. When you are shut down, when the team I worked on at Ground Zero in New York City, there were businesses that were shut down for months. It makes a huge impact. And when you're providing good critical incident, crisis mental health care, you're getting people back to work, which means that they can pay their bills. Crisis forces you to become connected to others. In a crisis, we'll see higher levels of community. We've seen that here in Orlando. 3 major critical incidents over a 4-day period. Nothing like that has ever happened in this country. Even 9/11 was, I remember that Tuesday morning, you do too, but it was one major crisis on that Tuesday morning, September the 11th. It wasn't one day later another crisis, one day later another crisis, and in Central Florida we've had that. Crisis events test us, which reveal gaps, and we learn from every crisis event. Crisis comes in different forms, which requires continual preparation. That's why you're part of this training event. So when we take a look at this, let me tell you some things that we're not going to do. Crisis response is not therapy. Crisis response is not therapy. We're educating the community. We're not providing therapy through radio, television, through print. We're educating, and we're doing psychoeducation to stabilize. And you'll take a look at, there are a number of other goals. You have this in your study guide, but look at the bottom where it says never ask emergency personnel the F word. Of course, the F word is feelings. Sometimes I'll say with civilians, you'll say the F word is fine, F-I-N-E, because if people say, oh, I'm fine, and they just witnessed a murder, they're not fine. They're numb. They're in shock. You cannot ignore your own emotional reaction to trauma. And if you've been exposed enough, you too will need some level of care. You can't be a hero to everybody. So if you've been overexposed, you pull yourself out of the fight. Now let's talk about media partnerships. That's really the main focus of our training time today, because I want you to be able to see that media partnerships mean both sides work together to be able to create calm. Both sides work together to stabilize the community. Mental health is working alongside media to bring more calm, to get people back to their normal daily life activities. Routine, it's not in your study guide, but routine is one of the significant factors that will help people psychologically decompress. Allison Holmes is a college professor. She said there are many factors that go into, like prior life history, trauma, stress, health, social, family circumstances, ongoing post-Boston Marathon professor. She teaches in Boston, of course. Coping skills and emotion and emotional regulation skills. It's possible that this could happen, although I would caution that many people have acute stress symptoms that dissipate over time. And of course, for many people, they're able to do that. We see currently that with veterans from Afghanistan, Iraq, and with what is happening now in Syria, veterans that come back are traumatized differently than veterans that came back from World War II. And you think, well, why did that happen? And one of the factors, the veterans that come back from the Middle East, they're coming back on commercial flights. They're by themselves. They come back to an airport. Usually there's no group of people other than maybe family, perhaps, to meet them. But the veterans from World War II, the Pacific in particular, they came back on slow-moving freighter ships, thousands of these GIs, and they debriefed. They talked about what they saw. They talked about what they heard. They talked about what they smelled, what they experienced at Guadalcanal, what they experienced at Iwo Jima. They debriefed. One of the principles I live by in crisis is called, if you can talk through it, you can get through it. So when we take a look at this, there are multiple streams of media. In your study guide, I hope you're using the study guide. I created this, and it took weeks to put together to give you a tool that would help you to make a difference in your community. So I want you to check where you think you're best suited at this point in time. Do you think you're best suited for television, radio, newspaper, magazines, internet, or video? Now those on the left side of your screen, we would call traditional media. But remember, now there's documentaries, there's webcasts, podcasts, streaming live casts on Facebook in particular. Many of you may already be involved in Facebook live casting. And of course, social media. And since there are multiple streams of media, now good news, that means there are multiple streams of helping people, multiple streams of being able to make a difference. Multiple streams is a good news, because this increases the opportunity to help people, because you're able to help people as a mental health professional through any one of these outreaches. And of course, as you do that, I know that's part of why you're involved in the helping professions. You want to make a difference. But as you do that, it expands your name into the community as a professional who really wants to come alongside and make a difference. Now, there's an opportunity to do that literally every day. Let's take a look at critical incidents that require mental health care. The community events, let's look at the right side first. If you take a look at the list on your screen, large-scale disasters, terrorism, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, fire, accidents. And by the way, fire, still the biggest reason you'll lose your home is a fire, not another type of natural disaster. And fire creates more actual dollar damage than any other natural disaster in the United States. Right now, so many of our friends in the Gatlinburg area of the Smoky Mountains losing their homes. One of my clients here in Orlando had a home, a family home. It wasn't, a huge home. They called it a cabin, but it was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, a nice home. But it had been in the family for over 50 years. and they used it for holidays and during summer breaks and such. It burned to the ground. Everything was destroyed. Hundreds and hundreds of homes. The death count in the Gatlinburg area now, over 7 people have died from the fires. But with fires, we also look at, after fires, multiple injuries and fatalities. School bus accidents in particular, tour bus accidents, child-related traumatic events. Now, these are community events. They touch all of us. High publicity violent sex crimes, homicides in the community or homicides in the school from mass school shootings. These are the big ones, and of course, massive environmental pollution. So on community events, the media is heavily involved, and we saw this after Pulse. I saw this after Columbine High School. Of course, Hurricane Katrina, the Florida hurricanes in 2004, the work that our team did at Ground Zero in New York City. The national news and the international news is everywhere. They're looking for stories, and what I'm going to encourage you to do, the stories we're sharing, is how to calm people down, how to prevent people from being further traumatized, what I call being re-traumatized psychologically through the different things that are happening in their community. As I take a look at this, look over on the other side. At the other side, these happen every day. Accidents, sexual assault, abuse, any life-threatening experience, robbery, serious physical injury or abuse, perception of a serious injury, somebody who's in a bank that's robbed, they don't get shot, but they're afraid they're going to. They almost are hit and killed. Tragically, even this morning in my preparation for our time together, the former mayor of a city near Orlando, the city of Kissimmee, was biking, just getting his morning exercise. Somebody apparently texting and driving drove over him on a sidewalk and tragically killed him because he was a public person, a public figure. It impacts the entire community. As you take a look at this, serious injury or death, particularly if it involves your children, your grandchildren, your relatives, suicide of a family member, suicide of a coworker, homicide. Filicide is one of the fastest growing forms of homicide, where a family member decides to murder their family and then commit suicide themselves, murder, suicide of the entire family. Injury or death to another child. Line of duty death is first responders, police, fire, medical. Tragically, here in Orlando, we've had so much of that the last few months. And remember, all around our state and, of course, around the nation, there are crisis events every day. And you'll notice the last one, observing any of the above also puts you at some level of risk. Now, what that means for you as a mental health professional, it puts you at some level of being able to help more people. How are we going to do that? We're going to pay attention to the multiplying factors. When I talk about multiplying factors, I want to be able to kind of walk you through what that looks like. And you should be able to see at this point in time, right here, right? All right, so there's your brain. This is not your brain on drugs. But when you're traumatized, when you're dealing with a patient who's traumatized, their amygdala, the alarm system in the brain, if you look just up over my shoulder, you'll see the red box, right? That's our alarm system. I'm so thankful, Aaron, that we're having this training today. Tomorrow, the Winter Park Fire Department are testing the fire system, and this building burned down. We've been in this building almost 25 years, and it burned almost to the ground. I remember that night well. This is an older building, and many of you may have offices in older facilities. And so right here in our building, the fire department came. It's about 6 o'clock one night, pounding on the door, you have to leave, you have to leave. And when the amygdala, the alarm system of the brain, goes off, it's like the alarm system that you see above my shoulder. Now, wow, is the alarm system efficient. Now, this building has fire sprinklers. And you think, man, crisis can happen anywhere. It absolutely can. And the more things that I call them multipliers, the greater impact it has psychologically. In fact, let's take a look at the multipliers for a moment. The first one, anything that affects children, anything affecting children is going to multiply and make it a more dangerous situation psychologically. That's why school shootings, Sandy Hook. I remember working with first responders at Sandy Hook, and some just retired, never went back to work. They were not able to function after seeing children murdered with assault weapons. in their kindergarten classroom. Your kindergarten classroom should be the safest place for you, not the most dangerous. Anything affecting children. But then we add to that human responsibility, like terrorism that we saw in Sweden just this morning with another terrorist attack. If there's no warning, that multiplies, makes it worse. Casualties makes it worse. Body recovery, witnessing recovery. Here in the Central Florida area after the Pulse shooting, of course, 49 people murdered by a terrorist, 53 others shot by the terrorist, and the first responders who went in telling me about cell phones going off all over the floor, cell phones attached to those victims who couldn't be moved for a day or two. Body recovery has a huge psychological impact. Perception of the event to personal safety. If you think you're going to be harmed, that too will have a psychological impact. And the more of these that you add to it, the more we have a multiplier effect and the more psychological trauma. And here in Central Florida, having 3 major catastrophes within a 4-day period has just put our mental health community on overload. So I'm so thankful that you are part of this training event. So how can, this is the trauma piece, how can we take the trauma piece over to the news media? I want you to research. I'm going to give you 7 different keys, and the first one is to research. I want you to pay attention. If you're going to add value to the media, when a situation happens, the news media always asks, who is my audience? So is it the general public? If it's a hospital, it may be their funding sources. Is it a government agency? Is it children's agencies, medical staff, elected officials, news staff? Is it education staff? Is it advertisers, media producers, families? And when you take a look at the idea, once you get past who are they trying to reach, because you're going to customize and personalize your message to that particular audience. So that's the first thing. Do your research. Do your research. You'll see in the study guide, why should the media call you? I want to take a moment to look at that. Are you a qualified expert? Is that why you have become a credentialed forensic expert? Do they call you because you're an elected official? Because you're a strong communicator? Do they call you because of position or title or because of your years of credentialed, well-networked? Are you an author? Are you already a trusted media source on radio or television? Do you have true life events that you have survived? Maybe you fled Cuba when Batista fell and Castro took over. Maybe you have survived a heart attack. Maybe you're a cancer survivor, right? Are you a researcher? Do you just make it easy for the news media? You'd be shocked how many people make it hard for the news media. I'm going to help you with that. I'm going to walk you through what you can do to be able to make their jobs easier. Reporters have an incredibly hard job. They have to work incredibly long hours, and they're usually underpaid and underappreciated. Are you a storyteller? You know, Brene Brown says that what she does is simple. She said, I do research and I tell a story because research is a story with a soul. Research is a story with a soul. She's a researcher. And when you think about research, do you do research? If you're dealing with a certain type of an event, like a school shooting, then you're going to tell a story because it has a soul. And the more you can tell a story, the more news media go, you're the kind of expert that I want to talk to because you make it personal. People do not relate to data, numbers, statistics. They can ask their Amazon Echo. They can ask their wireless device. They can ask Siri, Alexa. They can ask Cortina. If they just want facts, they don't need you. They want to hear a story. Are you a first responder? Are you bilingual? Right? And so the more of those factors you have, the more you're going to find that the media call you because they can trust you. Now let's look at some, I want you to rethink and expanding your viewpoint. These are some myths. This, by the way, is from a book that Ford Harding wrote. And on media myths, when you think about being on radio, television, being quoted by USA Today newspaper, if you think that the primary objective for the Wall Street Journal in calling you is to promote your agenda as a therapist, you are mistaken, because that's a myth. The goal is to promote and tell a story, and for us, is to tell a story that will calm a community down. if you think that the process starts with a press release, I've never used press releases, not since college, because I found that it didn't matter. Reporters are primarily interested in facts. Nope, they can look up the facts themselves. Facts aren't bad. And in fact, one of the strategies is give them a fact sheet. I always provide research. And when I say provide research, I mean together, here are stories, here are sound bites, here are data, because they need PowerPoint slide information. These reporters are working incredibly long hours. And so I want you to provide research, but when you're talking on camera, when you're talking on microphone, that's not your main focus. Look at this one. If I help a reporter, I'm entitled to future coverage. I want you to know, friend, that is a myth. If you help a reporter once, they may never call you again. I remember in the early days, 30 years ago, I thought, this is great. This is wonderful. When can we do this again? And the answer, never, because they go on to the next story. Now, that's good news, because the goal is helping people. I don't remember ever being paid to be on radio or television, to be paid to be in the newspaper, quoted in a magazine, quoted in a book. I write. I mean, if you write for Chicken Soup for the Soul, and if you have a great story, please share it with Chicken Soup, the Chicken Soup family of authors. I'm one, maybe you are, and they're always looking for great writers. Chicken Soup will pay you $200, and Chicken Soup will give you a free copy of the book. And if you haven't done that, consider it. But I want you to know, other than that, you don't get paid. You're making a difference in your community. And as you're making a difference in the community, it leads to our next key, to respect. I want you to respect the media's position, and number one position is their time. You have to respect their time, respect their intelligence, respect their platform, respect their format. If they are a news television, they're probably looking for 20 seconds, maybe 15 seconds of usable content. I did an event for the city of Orlando 2 nights ago, and with a local television station, recorded about 20 minutes worth of content. I knew they were going to edit it down, and they did. They edited it down to about 35 seconds, and that's fine. Respect their time, their intelligence, their platform, their format, their engineering requirements to control the production quality. Sometimes they're going to put a microphone in a place you might not be comfortable, or there's somebody right off a camera holding up a shield to get the lighting just right if you're outdoors, like you see in the shot on the screen after the Florida hurricanes here, with trees down, thousands of trees down in the Central Florida area. And if you remember the 4 Florida hurricanes that crisscrossed Central Florida, never happened in history. Busiest hurricane season for our state in 100 years. And tragically, my wife's aunt was killed in the first one, Hurricane Charlie, one of the 13 people killed by that storm. Her hometown of Lake Wales, Florida, had all 4 of those hurricanes cross over that little town in Polk County, Florida. In the process of that, I learned the importance of telling a story. You see, the news media, they want to share a story that connects with people. Remember, their commitment to community education is just as strong as yours. Yes, it's their job. They're trying to get ratings. But at the end of the day, I've never had a bad experience with a television reporter, a newspaper, a radio individual, because they're just trying to share a story. They're just trying to do their job. And if you do your job well, you're able to help them. Now, also, I want you to understand this. I want you to respect the fact that their producer is looking for something that may not be you. After the very contentious election season that we just went through, I did a number of news stories in the Washington, D.C. area about stress, things related to the election, and one of the most contentious elections in modern history. Really ugly how people responded. But in the process of all of that, I met so many new journalists that I didn't know. And when you meet a journalist, it's not in your study guide, but of course you're going to create a contact in your smartphone. You're going to, when you create the contact, you're going to get their cell phone number. You're going to find out their email, their website from the station. Whenever I get the contact information, because I'm standing there with the journalist, I'll always just take a quick picture and I'll put it right with the contact, because you may not meet that journalist again for some time. But in the process, what I've found is after the election, and after working with one radio station in the Washington area, the host called me several times and said, let's do this, let's do that. Okay, fine. It got scheduled, and then it got canceled because she said the producer doesn't want to do this. No problem. Not a problem. I remember after the floods in Sonoma Valley, California, in the wine district, the flooding, the historic flooding a few years ago, working with news stations every single morning, helping people manage the stress, the pressure. How do I deal with the fact that my home is flooded? What do I do? My business is flooded. The kids' school is flooded. What do we do next? How do we stay safe? How do we get through this? And then, all of a sudden one day, the producer said, we're done. And that's okay. I want you to know there are opportunities to help people everywhere. I just want you to be ready. And to get you ready, you're going to need some tools. Some tools to tell the story. You're going to need fact sheets, as I said. You're going to provide some data about what is happening. You're going to have Word docs, and you're going to find the correct spelling of any names that are mentioned in the story, any researchers, including your name as a researcher. You're going to provide those computer files, docs, spreadsheets, whatever format you want to provide. Sometimes I'll provide a PowerPoint slideshow. Frequently with television news stations and with radio stations, I'll provide information or write a short blog on the station website, and then that way it's able to help more people. At the end of that blog, I just want you to put your contact information. That way people can stay in touch with you, and now you're able to not only provide information on your counseling center agency website, you provided that same helpful information on your local radio, television, or newspaper website. I want you to provide other experts. You know, one of the greatest things, and it makes me so incredibly happy. That's why I love meeting new friends, because sometimes I'll get called for a story and they don't want me, they want, Dwight, who do you know? Because I love to connect my friends with my new friends. And as you do that, you're making a deeper level of connection to that journalist, because they know you're going to provide them with some other experts, and it makes their life easier, makes their life better. Providing hard data are numbers, and I'm not going to throw rocks at Wikipedia because I'm a Wikipedia editor. You probably are too. It's a great place to find some general information. But hard data would be something that's documented from a psychological study, from a recognized institution, Harvard, Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins. So you're providing hard data. Video B-roll means that you, if you have digital cameras, that you're able to provide some video footage to give to the news media. Of course, you're going to provide the appropriate web links. You're going to talk about trends. You're going to talk about your website. You're always allowed to give that, and referral agencies and hotlines. And don't be shy about providing your website, because every time you share a story, you become part of the story, and you're making your community a better place. And people will say, wow, that's the therapist I saw on local television. I remember you. Now, in your study on the screen, but in your study guide, I want you to know that I've put together something I want you to create. If you don't have one, I want you to build one. It's called Example of a Crisis Counseling Fact Sheet, right? And so you'll see, you hold it up to the screen, and you'll see a bunch of boxes. See that, right? And so you'll see these boxes, and as you see those boxes, you'll see that it looks at physical signs and symptoms, emotional signs and symptoms, behavioral, cognitive. It walks through every major symptom of somebody who's been traumatized. And what I encourage you to do, please take this with my permission, having taught critical incident, stress management, crisis response for a number of organizations for the last 3 decades. Take those signs and symptoms, put it on your letterhead, and then that way, whenever the crisis happens, you hand that to the journalist and you say, here's the recognized signs and symptoms. It says here's what to look for, here's what to do. In fact, after the tragic situation with the school shooter, we had some kids here, 2 young men who were going to do a Columbine-style shooting. Everything came together. One of their friends ratted them out, and at the very last minute, thank God, the very last minute, the friend ratted them out. They were apprehended by police, and instead of a gangland-style shooting, 1,000 rounds of ammunition, it was caught at the last minute, and the parents were so upset, understandably, so were teachers, that I took not just that information, but I wrote a series of short blogs, how to tell if your child's been traumatized, and they gave that booklet out to almost 100 different schools in Central Florida through the school board. You see, community education, just sitting down and saying, in between sessions, I'm going to to pull together data. I'm going to get information because I want to make my community better. When you do that, not only are you making your community better, you're becoming established as a mental health professional who cares. And when you do that, people trust you. And when you develop that level of trust, I want you to know people call you. Your schedule will stay full because you become known as the professional who cares, not a glory hound. You're not trying to be the next Geraldo. I remember after a crisis event, there are these commando kind of reporters who come in, but they're coming in because it's the next story. National media, for a national news story like Pulse, the research is clear. The national media will be there 11 days at the most. Normally it's 3 to 4 days. On a huge story, 11 days at the most, and then they go on to the next story. But I want you to be that trusted expert who is there year in, year out, making a difference in your community. When you do that, it makes all the difference in the world. Take a look at the next principle. It's to represent. To represent. And when I say represent, it's to use this strategy across multiple media platforms. And what tools do you have to represent your agency? A one sheet is when I'm coaching professionals to be able to move their career forward. A one sheet is literally like it sounds. It's a one sheet of all of your biographical information. No longer than one sheet, and it needs to be readable type, not micro. I mean, make it your best stuff. This is who I am, what I do. This is how I care. These are my credentials. Obviously, on that one sheet, you're providing your web page. When you go and you talk to the news media, you're providing business cards, a media kit, which tells the media how they can book you for future events. You'll notice, in fact, you'll notice on the screen, right in front of my yellow necktie, you'll see is that little brain prop that I got from Amazon.com for less than $20. And it's just a little children's prop to use to teach children the different sections of the brain. But I carried the prop, and they took the camera, got really close to that brain because it made it more visually interesting. And of course, you're providing your title so that they're able to quote you properly. Now, when I look at this, a media target, who's the best place for you to reach? If you're in South Florida, maybe it's working with the Miami Herald, great newspaper. I've worked with them many times, or the CBS affiliate there, TV4. Some great friends I have at that station. Maybe you're working with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And at the Atlanta Journal, some wonderful friends in the Atlanta area. I've got some wonderful friends with radio stations there. And I found at different events you build different relationships. So who are your targets? Are you going to be more of a radio, more of a television, more of a print, more of an online Facebook, more of a social media? But you'll see on the bullet points, see where it says, identifiable trends, keep your eyes and ears open. I want you to develop something that's simply called a Google. If you work with anorexia, bulimia, eating disorders, bigorexia, then what you can do is to be able to develop a Google alert where you have literally set up Google, and you've said, Google, give me the latest, greatest news stories. I did that this morning in my research time, and I had a Google alert that gave me an opportunity to then share with some key clients, hey, here's some trends you may want to know about. And as soon as it breaks, Google will send it to you by email. Now see where it says know the deadlines? That one's easy because the typical deadline is right now. The typical deadline is right now. And when you look at the idea of deadlines, since they're always in a rush, you'll notice in your study guide on page 8, it says sample television interview questions. I've given you some teaser. When you walk into a news interview, however it is, if you'll give them the sample questions, it makes their life easy. It also makes your life easy because you wrote the question so you know the answer. It'll take your anxiety level down. Finally, figure out how the news media prefers to be contacted. Are they email only? Some are. Are they phone at their desk, at the news desk? Cell, fax, there's still some older journalists that like fax, text, direct mail, studio. It will be one, not all. Do not wear out your welcome. You will not be invited back. Now, to be able to do that, I want you to pay attention to connection. Make it as easy as possible. That's why you have that list of questions. The easier you can make it, having a downloadable press kit on your website, you can go to my website, dwightbain.com, to see an example of that. having a bio, a promotional video on your YouTube channel, having one-sheets, of course, professional headshots, references, short articles, testimonials. The more things like that, the more it makes it easy for that journalist to be able to talk about you. Now, to achieve a successful connection with the news media, I want you to always ask, number one, is it news? Is it part of a bigger theme? Can you tie to a source who is newsworthy? Has the story already been told? What are the unique story angles? So maybe something's happened, everybody's talked about the story, but there's a unique story angle. You know, we've heard a lot about a previous generation of great ones who have passed on. Yesterday, Don Rickles. Last week, Jimmy Breslin. Jimmy, of course, the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer in New York, who was known for the small story. When President John F. Kennedy was shot and assassinated in November 1963, everybody was writing huge stories about JFK, not Jimmy. Jimmy called Arlington National Cemetery, and he said, I want to speak to the man that will dig the grave for John F. Kennedy. Jimmy was known as the expert about the small story, and that's a unique story angle. Do I offer real people for the backstory? Have I researched credible reference sources? Do I communicate with rehearsed segments of information? These 20 seconds are called sound bites. 20 seconds or less, rehearse those. Am I the best source? Should I refer to another source? And then one of my favorite questions when I'm coaching young professionals, what do I bring to the table? What do I bring to the table? What do I bring to the table? WDIBTTT. Because if you don't bring anything to the table, they're not going to call you. Help them find the right person. I realize as I'm going through this, sometimes people say, Dwight, I've got the study guide in front of me. I want to get all this information. You talk too fast. There is an answer key on the back page just for you. Now, when we take a look at this as we head into the final corner before some questions, and remember, you can always type your questions into the chat box on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. I want you to rehearse. I want you to rehearse. And to rehearse is what the great ones do. To rehearse and to be able not just to speak in sound bites, but 3 to 5 second segues. Listen for transition cues. Watch your floor director. Somebody hands you a microphone. We call it lollipopping the microphone. That just simply says hold it very close to your mouth for the best audio quality. When I think about rehearsal, I'm watching the last season of American Idol, one of the judges, Jennifer Lopez, as she's kicking somebody off the show. You didn't make the cut, young man. And she explained to him, she said, I practice with passion. That's why I can perform with passion. And she said, you didn't practice with passion. There's no passion in your performance because you, young man, were not rehearsed. So for successful interviews, and as Aaron said, I've had an opportunity to be interviewed literally thousands of times, thousands of hours, radio, television, print. I'm very passionate about taking mental health principles to the marketplace. Let's make our country, our hometown, a better place. To do that, it's a guide, but I want you to write down 3 principles. Be simple. Do not make it sound like psychobabble, as it's referred to. Be simple. Be bold. Once you say this is what to do, be bold about it. But then do you see the final one? Be brief. Be brief. You're not the star. The story is the star. Make the story the star. When you do that, your ego's not in the way. And if you make the story the star, then what you're going to find is that the media start to trust you. She's not in it to get famous. She's in it to help people. And when you're able to help people once, the media will come to you again and again and again. All right, let's take a look at the next principle. And this one I'm excited about. This is Friday afternoon. As we're recording this, I don't know what point in history you'll be listening, but we're recording on a Friday afternoon. There are 15,000 radio, TV shows, newspapers, and internet sources that need stories tomorrow. Yes, you read that right, 15,000. I've given you in your study guide a number of the direct links that are looking for stories. All you have to do is click on the link, and many of those, like ABC News, NBC.com, when you look at CNN.com, it'll say, do you have a story idea? Pitch your story, and I want you to. because I want you to match the news media needs to your professional expertise, right? So N to E to C. You look at the news media needs, you match your professional expertise, and you will be part of building community stability, and that's what we want. The final principle, before we take some questions, the final principle is this. I want you to be ready. Can you believe less than a year ago, our community, my hometown, my family moved here in 1960. I was a little baby. I don't remember it, but I remember growing up in one of the greatest places. And so to be ready, and that's the thing I found with crisis events, there's no warning when the next school shooting will happen, when the next terrorist attack will happen. But you can be ready. Number one, to be yourself. To be yourself. When I say be yourself, it's being able to not try to be somebody else. If you're a specialist dealing with children's needs, you're a perfect fit on dealing with certain news stories. Just be yourself. As you start to pay attention to the things that you're best at and you're not afraid to try, 15,000 radio, television, newspaper, and news websites are looking for you. They're looking for your expertise. And I don't want you to be afraid to try. I don't want you to be afraid or to think, well, I'm not that good. I'm not that famous. I haven't written a book. No, it's not that at all. Because there are some people and their ego gets in the way, and the news media won't work with them twice. They might work with them once, but they won't work with them twice because they're doing it for glory. And I know that you, my friend, are doing it to make a difference in your community. Now, the study guide has a number of different reference points, but the final principle that I wanted to leave with you. If you want to partner with the media to make a positive difference, here's what I want you to know. I want you to focus on not information. I want you to focus on application. And you'll see on the screen, it says, if you focus on theory, and I don't mean to hurt your feelings if you're a college professor, because I'm an adjunct professor. I teach at different universities. But I don't want you to sound like a college professor. I don't want this to sound like a college lecture. It's not a college lecture. It's a news show. They need information in a way that they can apply. The shooting has happened. Here's the 3 things you need to do. Number 1, if you talk through it, you can get through it. And then I walk them through. These are different steps. In your study guide, you'll see there are a number of different references in the bibliography. There are resources out there, but the greatest resource is you. You have a story. You can make a difference. You can make a difference in your hometown with people I could never help. You're the one. You're the key. You are the mental health professional who can make the greatest difference. And I want you to. I want to challenge you to do that because I learned this after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. I'm part of a national team. We ran out of experts, of people that were well-trained, of hours after the Pulse shooting here in Central Florida. I ran out of people, and I'm a trainer. I host training events with the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, helping equip people in community events. I've trained more people, the foundation in Baltimore says, more people in community mental health recovery than anybody in the United States. And I'm very honored to be part of this incredible organization equipping schools and colleges and houses of worship, equipping businesses, equipping professionals, and especially the mental health community, because today is part of that. Challenging you to take your ideas, your healing message to the marketplace. That's what we want to do. And as part of that, maybe I can help you in the future. If so, I'm on all social media platforms. You just have to type in my name, just like it sounds, Dwight Bain, D-W-I-G-H-T-B-A-I-N, no dots, no spaces. I post every day on social media, 2 to 5 times a day with news stories, sharing information, links. Let me tell you why. 11 years ago, I had a heart attack. And that changed everything. I like to tell people a heart attack saved my life because I realized I'm one of those very fortunate people who got a second chance. And having a second chance absolutely drives me, pushes me. What can I do to make a difference in my hometown? What can I do to help you make a difference in your hometown? And being able to say, hey, every day is important, and every day there are crisis events. Every day there are bad news stories, but I want you to know when you share helpful mental health information to make your hometown better, you become part of an answer. And that, my friend, is a good news story. And so I'm always eager to get to meet some new friends if you stay connected on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. I'm posting every day. And anything I post, anything I write, anything I teach you, please, 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 please go take it and teach somebody else. I am committed to doing things to make a difference in our industry, to make a difference with you. And as part of that, I think let's do this. Let's, Aaron, and take some questions.
All right, so those of you that have questions, go ahead and type them into the questions panel now. While you're doing that, I'm just going to throw out an announcement that if you're enjoying this content today, Dwight will also be presenting on how to have the difficult conversation you've been avoiding with family, coworkers, parents, partners, or children on November 10th for the Florida Mental Health Counselors Association. If you're interested in that webinar, then please go to fmhca.org, which stands for Florida Mental Health Counselors Association.org. And we also will be having a webinar here at NBFE on Friday, July 21st from 3 to 5 p.m. with Dr. Norman Hoffman, Michael Haller, and Dr. Tommy Black, entitled How to Become a Successful Court Expert, which is a response to requests we've gotten from our members on how to get some information on some of the business aspects of forensic mental health evaluation. So now it looks like we don't actually have any questions. What we have is some commentary. For example, Charles says, awesome workshop, thank you. I'm going to take the lack of questions that we have as evidence that you have been absolutely clear and pristine in your message, Dwight. And then on that note then, since we don't have any questions, fortunately people have your contact information now and they can send in a question later on if they like to. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up for today. And I want to encourage you as attendees to please complete that evaluation form. Remember, you have to in order to get CEUs from us. And do that today because we'll be entering your attendance in tonight. Now, Dwight, do you have any parting comments before we end today's session?
Well, thanks, Aaron, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be part of carrying a message of hope. You know, when you are a messenger during a time of crisis, the news media are looking for stories, but many times in the news media, are many times criticized because they talk about the bad news. You and I can be part of the good news. We can be part of saying, hey, here's another perspective. I've taught different mental health professionals through the years on the importance of being involved, and I've taught at the foundation in Baltimore. And I just encourage people, don't wait. Please take your story, your credentials, your expertise, and get to know it. Take time. I poured into this study guide because to take your story. You can help people I can never help. So please take this, run with it, because that's how you change a culture. We take these principles that we've learned, mental health principles that we know work, and we carry it to the marketplace, and we do it through the news media. So I guess between now and the next time that we talk, Aaron, I'll see our viewing audience on the news.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dwight, for your engaging and informing presentation. We wish everyone a happy and fulfilling weekend, and we will see you next time.